Hi, everyone. It's DocTalk. We are mid-October. Many of you know I live in Naples, Florida, and we are recovering literally from two hurricanes back to back. This one just traveled up our coast yesterday, made a turn at Tampa, and destroyed much of the middle of the state. um, Operations going on. Everyone in Florida knew this big one was coming and prepared and evacuated. Nonetheless, we had very unusual circumstances. For all of you from the Midwest, you would have been very proud of the tornadoes that were produced out of the front line of this hurricane. Florida typically doesn't get tornadoes, and the tornadoes that Florida gets are very little spin ups. And for those of you familiar, they're F0 or F1s that are just little pencil thin things, and they come quickly and leave quickly. Yesterday we had F3 tornadoes, no doubt, and some that you in Kansas and Oklahoma and other places would recognize as the ones that hit your area. Fortunately, the biggest one here was out in rural area and did not hurt anyone. There were others in urban areas, including the area where I was working yesterday. Um, there are all kind of seasonal hazards, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. What I love about October is it's Fire Prevention Month. And this week is actually the Fire Prevention Week. So it's the core of an entire month where we think about winter safety around anything that burns. All of our heating materials, all of our things that we use outdoors, all of the things that we use to thaw frozen pipes and thaw frozen things that are outside, etc., all can produce terrible burns. We are preventing burns at a very rapid rate, but nonetheless, they can happen in an instant. And we think about things that prevent us from being hurt by burns, things like smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms. And it's time to change your batteries. And it's time to practice your fire drills at home, how to escape, where you'll meet, making sure that people don't circle around and come back in. Make sure you educate your kids. None of the stuff that you have is important enough to risk your life. So you get out of the house, and we will fix or we will replace things that are damaged in the fire afterwards. Many of our homes now are built fire resistant. You, as humans, just have to get out as fast as possible. You get the maximum amount of time if you have working smoke alarms. And I'm thinking about my career and rescuing people out of houses over 42 years. And I have never been in a house where there was a fatality where there was a working smoke alarm. I have been in lots, unfortunately, of fires where people died, no working smoke alarms. There's nothing better for me than arriving on a scene and still hearing the smoke alarms going off inside the house. Fire prevention, smoke prevention for the kids, stay away from fire, stop, drop, and roll. All very important elements. Number two, so let's talk a little bit about weather events and just a little bit about the horrible things that have happened around our big hurricanes. The last two hurricanes have ripped up through Florida, and the first one, Helene, went up through then Georgia and into the Carolinas. In Carolinas, it stalled and dropped feet of rain in areas that cannot absorb that amount of rain that quickly. It flooded people that weren't prepared for it. It washed out roads, it washed out bridges, it washed out people, and they will be finding those people for some time. Some of the rescue crews working to get to those areas got in accidents. I want to warn you, a wide range of miles around any kind of natural disaster is an active work zone. There are people moving towards it. There are people evacuating away from it. Got to be really careful. And we had rescuers in a variety of storms over the last couple weeks who were injured in traveling en route. In some cases, these rescuers working in convoys towards the disaster site stopped at an accident, tried to help with other people, got hit by others, who weren't thinking about an accident up ahead, et cetera. So there's a wide zone around any disaster where you just have to be extra, extra careful. For those of you impacted by the disaster, it's been a terrible year for those and the people in the Carolinas. Long-term impacts of what hit you. Asheville is one of my very favorite cities in North Carolina. A beautiful area with the Biltmore and the Grove Park Inn and other places, and they're flooded and damaged very heavily. There's heavy loss of life in that area, and condolences to all of you who are there. Disasters bring other health problems, and I'm going to remind you, we have congregate living. When you get pushed out and you're in a shelter, we have had outbreaks of the norovirus. We've had outbreaks of respiratory diseases. We've had outbreaks of flu. We've had outbreaks of COVID in some of our shelter areas, and in people who are thrown together in hotels and other places. Even some of our rescuers who are working in very congested areas. They're very tired and worn out at the end of the day, and they go and living with other people for some period of time, and they pick up the bugs that are going around. Always have to use good hygiene, and anything that impacts our usual way of living kind of reduces your instincts to clean well, to be really careful about your food, to not be coughing on other people, etc. So if any of you are in those situations where you're in unexpected congregate living, when you're not used to it, you have to be careful. I'll make a final plea. We now have full availability of our COVID vaccines, our flu vaccines, and our RSV vaccines. RSV vaccines for the little people and the older people. Last night, let's say 2 a.m, one of the calls I took when I was at the dispatch center at the hurricane is a crouping little 8-month-old that has RSV, sick as heck. I can hear that crouping, and I can hear mom and grandma just so sad because this child is so ill. Those illnesses can be prevented by vaccinating the infants and by vaccinating pregnant moms. So the OBGYNs are working very hard on vaccine programs for pregnant moms at a certain stage of pregnancy getting that RSV vaccine. We have additional ways to prevent it in children that need protection. That's monoclonal antibodies, and a different vaccine for seniors who can get very sick from RSV. Number 2, we have the flu vaccine. The flu that was circulating in the Southern Hemisphere seems to be a good match for our current vaccine. And so get your flu shot in one shoulder, and in the other shoulder, it's time for a vaccination against COVID. We're right this period, we're across the nation in a little downslope of COVID. That's expected this time of the year. You have to wait when you've had COVID for 3 months to get full effect of the new vaccine. So those of you who had infections during the summer, it is just about time for you to get your COVID vaccination so that your immune system is prepared for the holidays, and we don't have another upslope when it comes to holidays. When we all get together for holidays, we don't want to be spreading COVID. It is a modified version of the COVID vaccination for the new variants that are circulating now, and again, very safe and effective. So time to think about vaccines. It is fall. It's time for the trees to be changing. It's time to be thinking about pulling your winter wear out and putting away some of that summer wear. We have to get through this period of time. Go through and do your fire prevention things that you do around the house. Educate the kids. Enjoy, and we'll talk to you right before Halloween. Take care, everyone.